Okay, guys, well, welcome back to It's Your Money. My name's Trevor Murphy. I will be your host. Um, Today, we are going to be doing financial planning for medical care or medical care planning. We have a aging life care professional with us today. Tara Ackley will be joining us soon to do the presentation with Peter. But first, we have our sponsor, Mary Beth Steen from Habitat for Humanity in Orange County. Welcome, Mary Beth.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. I am going to share the screen so we can get your website up there.
Okay.
And then I'll let Pete go ahead and ask you some questions.
Well, Mary Beth, and we see it right on the screen there, but what is the mission for Habitat for Humanity here in Orange County?
Yeah, so our number one mission we go by is basically we build strength, stability, and self-reliance through shelter.
And tell us a little bit about how long Habitat for Humanity has been here in Orange County and some of your accomplishments that you've been able to achieve.
Okay, so in Orange County, we've been here 35 years, but Habitat International is based out of Americus, Georgia. There's a misnomer that we were founded by President Jimmy Carter, and that's not true. Actually, in 1976, Millard and Linda Fuller started Habitat. He's a minister, and it's kind of a model of it takes a village, so to speak. So here in Orange County, we are currently building 4 homes in phase 3 in Fullerton for a total of 12 homes in Richmond Park, which is also a neighborhood revitalization project. And then we also are starting to build 6 homes in Stanton, and we will be building 2 homes in Santa Ana very soon.
Wow, you must have an enormous number of volunteers to help out. Do you have to have building experience in order to volunteer?
No, anybody can volunteer. However, with COVID, we did kind of suspend the volunteer individual program. So this summer, we're happy to announce that we will be going back to our team builds, mainly corporations that can send up to 15 employees. Really no experience is needed. The homes are at different phases usually, so some might just need gardening and final painting. At the beginning, it's, pouring concrete and getting the foundation going, but we always have crew leaders and staff on every single site. So they do safety instructions at the beginning, and then they are ready to answer any questions the volunteers would have. And we are mainly run by volunteers, so we actually have a fairly small staff compared to a medium-sized organization. And I'm very happy to say that in all my work in nonprofits over 25 years, Habitat has one of the lowest admin at 8% for admin overhead charges, which is very low.
Yeah, that is. It's super low. With the cost of housing today, does the person who moves into the house have to pay anything, or is this all free to them?
Yeah, this is another misnomer. We don't give away free homes. We do provide affordable housing. And so you have to be a U.S. citizen. You have to show a need. As you can imagine, we get hundreds of applicants, but you have to go through kind of a rigorous application process. It does take sometimes 8 months to get pre-approved. We have volunteers who actually go to their home to see their current living situation. Mainly, the number one reason people apply at Habitat is because of overcrowding. And we don't want them paying the 50%, 60, 70% of their income on just rent. And that's usually the case. So
what is a good ratio? Since this is a financial planning course, what is a good ratio for a home buyer?
We like to keep their mortgage rate around 30%.
30% of someone's
30%.
income.
Yeah, so it is a sliding scale. We look at, let's say it's a couple applying with a family of 3. We take into consideration the number of members in the family and their ability to pay. So some people ask, well, how much do they have to pay? It just depends. We go through their financials with in detail.
Wow. So that's really nice. And so if somebody wants to, when do you see it opening up for Habitat for Humanity as far as COVID is concerned?
This summer, we're going to accept volunteers, and we have been having people move into their homes, and we've actually had a parade for them instead of a home dedication. We usually bless a house, but because of COVID, we've been having these little drive-by in their car parades, which has worked out pretty good. And actually, AAA has gifted a used car, to each family who has purchased a Habitat home.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone wants to learn a little bit more about Habitat for Humanity, Mary Beth, they can contact you, I assume.
Yeah, I see the our home page up, and the home ownership part is the place to start if they're interested in applying for application, because we would recommend you go to a virtual orientation, and it answers pretty much all the questions.
Okay, great. Hey, Mary Beth, thank you so much for being one of our sponsors. I really appreciate it, and we hope you get a lot of calls.
Well, and thank you, Pete, for inviting me today. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right,
Okay.
Let's get into the medical care planning.
Okay, so Pete, do you want to give a quick, for those that
Review.
are maybe just joining us, just a quick review of where we've been? This is our 5th week, so we got, including this week, we're halfway through, and why are we focusing on this topic? Because it doesn't, in a lot of financial planning courses or workshops, we don't talk about this very much.
Well, the reason for that is that one of we should plan for major expenditures, and people spend anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000 in the last 6 months of their life. And so, and the medical industry can keep you alive for a long time. And they don't talk much about the quality of life. So death and money probably are the 2 most difficult things for family and spouses to discuss. And since this is a large sum of money that you need to kind of plan for, it belongs within It's Your Money course. And what's really unique is that we have our guest speaker today, Tara, who is in a profession that most people have not heard of. And so what I'd like to do right off the bat is let's introduce her to the program. And I noticed that you got the Ask First, her Ask First open up. And so she, from an educational point of view, she's got her RN license. And Tara, tell us a little bit about how you got to be in the profession that you are in.
Well, that's a great question. And Pete, first of all, I just want to say thank you for you and Trevor asking me to be involved on this discussion today. I think it's an extremely important topic that does get overlooked. And it is very important that all people who are living life and have a plan of not living here very as long as they would want to, you need to be prepared.
Well, everybody has got something in common, that we are born and we are going to die.
That's right. That's right. So I got into this field way back when I entered the healthcare environment as a respiratory therapist. And I worked in an acute care setting in Whittier, a trauma center, actually. And I was in my early 20s when I did that. And I got to see life and death, absolutely, in the acute care setting, in the ER and in the ICU. And so from there, I moved out of the hospital setting into a skilled care, skilled nursing environment for several years. And then I learned later about a service that's non-medical, but very important and necessary when people go home, and it's home care. So I worked in the field with seniors and their families, working with them, making those transitions from hospital to home and helping them get prepared to handle what they're going to now live with long-term in their home setting. And it's usually going to require that they needed some home care, and there's an expense to that. And then I went back to school and obtained my license as a vocational nurse. And then I've done care management now for about 5 years, but I joined RN health management about 1.5 years ago. And it really, this company, I can tell you, is probably the most structured and detail-oriented and professionally run care management company I've come across so far.
Yeah. And when we say a care management company, don't people just go to their regular doctor and get the care that they need?
No, it's not that simple, and it's not that straightforward. And actually, doctors don't always know all of the things you're going to need help with at your home setting. The doctor is just evaluating a diagnosis that he's responsible to manage. He's not managing your whole life. He's not managing your whole care.
Yeah. Do you serve as the agent for people's health care, or do you just assist the agent?
Correct. We are not assigned as agents. We are really more of a consultant. Really, we are consultants available to families, older adult children who have aging parents who are really going through some transitions in life, and how are they going to navigate it. So we provide consultation, oversight, and guidelines to help them navigate.
And I see you have your LVN license. You put your client's interest first. And how do you charge for your services?
Well, our particular services, and most all concierge care managers, I'm going to say, because we're going to get into different types of care managers. The care managers that are here at RN Health and other care managers in the environment that serve private practice, let's say, are privately paid. So it's not covered by insurance. It's an out-of-pocket expense. And it can vary, it's usually an hourly rate. And it's a service that's really as needed. It's not something you subscribe to a certain number of hours every month or every year. It really is on an as needed basis. And so when medical needs are changing, care needs are developing, you could use quite a bit of time from a consulting care manager to help button things up, and then care managers slip back out of the picture.
Yeah, I've used your firm on a number of clients, and it's kind of like I am the healthcare agent, and I have the legal authority to make the medical decisions for the individual, but I don't have the medical background to make a competent decision. And so I don't know anything about brain cancer. I don't know a lot more today than I did before, but I didn't know severe dementia. So I don't know what the future holds or what kind of caregiving needs that they have. And you and your firm have just been totally helpful and have actually saved money for the individual by getting the services that the individual needed quicker and better than without you. And I didn't know that there were people out there like you that are available to healthcare agents. So if somebody wanted to, or do you belong to an association, or where would they go to find individuals such as yourself?
there is an association, and honestly, it is an underused association, and it's not as well known as we'd like it to be. But our company is a member of the Aging Life Care Association. So the name of that association gives away what we do. We are managing life and the care that shows up as needed in life. And the association has members all across the state. And it started out as a group called the National Association of Geriatric Care Managers. And they changed the name to a broader title, opening up aging life. It's not really always geriatric. You could be under age 60 and have quite a bit of care needs, and management assistance would be a good idea. So Aging Life Care Association is the entity. And there's a lot of there's companies, and then there's private practice people that are single individual care managers there.
Okay. Most individuals, when they put together their documents and it comes to their advanced healthcare directive, name a family member. And because they trust that family member that they will do what's best for them. The problem a lot of times is that the family member doesn't have any kind of a medical background. Is the medical industry today the same as it was 10, 15, 20 years ago?
No, as in almost every industry, things are changing at a lightning pace, honestly. Hospitalizations and the way patients are provided treatment there has changed. Patients at skilled nursing level have changed. Patients coming home are coming home with a higher acuity level than they used to. Everything has shifted. The amount of caregivers and the labor pool for caregivers has changed. Different service providers, it's expanded. People a lot of service companies in the medical field are actually expanding what they do to meet more people's needs under one roof. So if you're not up to speed, insurances have changed. If you're not up to speed on these changes, there's just no possible way, there's no possible way you can ever know everything.
Yeah.
And it's so important to be connected to the right people in your circle so that you've got resources who have more information in the areas you need.
Yeah.
So that's what we are as a care manager, is we just are a really good support to building a team like that around the client and the family.
Yeah, let's get into, oh, I forgot to ask you, so what is your hourly rate?
We are a nurse agency. So even though we don't provide nursing care hands-on, we provide nursing oversight. And so our hourly rate is $180 an hour. And then there are some companies that don't have RNs on board at all. They're not nurses at all. They might be a skilled clinician as a social worker or a physical therapist or a speech therapist. But because we're nurses, we really have a specific lane of operation, and our rate is $180 an hour.
Okay. And and again, your 100, it's not like you're going to be there 24/7 with the patient or with the healthcare agent. So I found that when I've used your services, it averaged out about approximately $5,000 annually. So to me, that $5,000 was absolutely, totally well spent.
Yeah, when we get into why does a care manager need to be involved, and when does a care manager need to be involved, that's when the money starts showing up. But you've got serious issues happening and you need the right people on board right away, getting things settled down and just making things come together much more quickly.
Okay, let's get into the outline. Medical care planning. You want to scroll down, Trevor? Trevor. Okay. We're talking about what is a care manager. Here's the kind of what Tara was talking about a little bit before. Let's go ahead and go to the next. Is there anything that you want to kind of focus in on this, Tara, on this one?
Yeah, and actually the slide before, we don't have to go back to it, but I want to help our listeners understand that you could be talking to somebody at the insurance side, and you could be talking to someone with the title of care manager, or they might have the title case manager. And then you go into the hospital and you're going to talk to probably someone by the name, a title of a case manager. They may also call themselves care managers. They may also call themselves care coordinators in the hospital setting. And then you go home and you have non-medical services from a caregiving company, and they have a care coordinator and they have a care manager. And so I'm trying to emphasize, it's important to know where you're at talking to somebody in the role of managing care choices and what is that role specific to what they're dealing with. So in a hospital setting, it's totally different than when you get to home, and now you have people from outside the home coming in and supporting. So
we're going to get more into that because it's confusing.
Yeah, it is. And so I just wanted to emphasize there's a variety of types of roles in different places. Our role at RN Health Management is very specific to one-on-one. We don't shuffle a bunch of different people. We work one-on-one with a client and their family. They're typically at home, but they don't always have to be. But usually they're in their long-term environment, let's say, of living, and something has happened. There's been an injury, there's been a new diagnosis, there's been a progression of a condition they've been living with for a long time. They've gotten sick and had to go to the hospital. Things are happening, transitioning quite quickly, and they want an outside objective, medically knowledgeable professional to identify the risks areas. What are the medical priorities? Who do we talk to get those things managed? What should we be preparing for, the next steps? How fast can we do those things? What is it going to cost? We as a care manager approach in a very broad picture quickly, what is going on in this scenario? What are the most important things that have to be dealt with now? And we emphasize that we want continuity of care. So if this person is at home and things are changing, we want to keep continuity for them there. If they've gone into the hospital, we want to try to keep continuity from home to hospital, back to home. So we're really often the fluid in the movement of this transition. And we are very familiar with hospital settings, skilled nursing settings, home settings, boarding care settings. And so because of that, we know how to navigate things quite quickly, who to talk to, what to ask, information, follow up, get it done, and get out of the picture again.
You're one of the only ones that really have all you care about is the patient.
Yeah.
You know, where you're not working for the hospital, you don't work for the medical office, you don't work for the skilled nursing facility, you don't work for the board and care. And if anybody doesn't realize it yet, but dying and medical care is a huge business. It's not like we have a choice. We are all going to go through that process. And so it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And when you don't talk, that's when the problem starts. So let's get into the next slide. This is the Care Association. So everybody has that address or the email address. And I'm sure, Tara, if somebody has some follow-up questions, specifically, they can give you personally a call or an email.
Oh yeah, at the end of our presentation, our contact info is there. Okay. If you went into this website, you would find Leanne Godfrey, who is the founder of the company, and she's listed there as the key member.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. Next one. Okay, so these are considered levels of care, but the terminology is what's really important and what that means. Because hospitals today are not that crowded. Except for the COVID issue, but what does acute care mean?
Yeah, well, acute care, acute, the word acute comes from, it's a sudden change, an immediate thing. It just happened. It's acute. So if you have an acute injury, you were playing basketball and you sprained your ankle, that's an acute injury. If you were in a car accident, that's an acute injury. But if you've been living with asthma for all your life, that's not acute, that's chronic. That's a long-term problem. But you could have an exacerbation, a change in condition with your asthma, long-term chronic thing, and it would be now considered acute episode. So you need to go get it treated right away. That's what hospitals are for. And hospitals they're set up to provide and treat all kinds of things. So babies and babies being born and the ER and things coming in from the ER off the streets. And then they have the ICU, which is a very intense level of care. And then they have a step down unit from intense care to a less intense care.
Does your private medical doctor treat you when you are in a hospital?
There actually, a lot of patients think that's the case, but it's not the case. Doctors who are following you on a day-to-day, month-to-month, annual basis are treating you for your regular stuff. When you go to the hospital, it's way far, I'm not going to say above the knowledge of a primary care physician, but you really do need more of someone who's dealing with acute scenarios all the time. They're up to speed on the best treatments on the cutting edge. They're practicing their level of intensity in the hospital setting. So you really honestly don't want your primary care physician meeting you there, but they are doctors that have never seen you before, and after you leave, they won't see you again.
And these are called and these are called hospitalist.
They are called hospitalists because the hospital hires them to be their doctor.
And they don't know anything usually about the patient except for what they're seeing in front of them.
Correct. And that's all they're supposed to do. They're not supposed to know everything else about you. However, the problem is most people, especially the older we get, the more conditions we walk in the door with, the more medications we walk in the door with. And those doctors don't have a lot of time to figure out what are your underlying conditions that might have led you to landing in the hospital now. They're only going to look at the key priorities, and the key priorities are to stabilize your health condition and figure out where you need to go next to get treated.
Yeah.
And that is insurance influenced. That wasn't always the case in years past. Insurances are the ones who have really put on pressure to doctors and nurses to identify and treat as rapidly as possible and move the patient out to a lesser, lower care level because the cost goes down. When you're in the hospital, you're paying for all those services that you may not ever need. You may not need an MRI, you may not need emergency department services, but you're in a hospital that provides it. So the daily rate the insurance is paying for you to be in that building is very high. They don't like that. So they want to move you out to the next lower level.
In fact, one of the first individuals that you will meet once you're in a hospital is the discharge nurse. Mm-hmm. And the discharge nurse is there to make sure that you are out of that hospital as quickly as possible into a skilled care facility. But before we talk about the skilled care facility, how many under Medicare, as I understand it, you have to be in the hospital 1 day, the admission day plus 3 days in order to get Medicare skilled care coverage.
Yeah, well, the thinking behind that, or the logic, is if you're ill enough, your intensity of being ill or injured or whatever is that severe enough that you actually need to stay for 3 days or more, then yeah, the likelihood is you're not going to walk out of there and go back home. Obviously, for you to have to be there that many days would indicate that this was a pretty intense situation, and it could qualify you for, it doesn't mean you have to go to the skilled nursing. It just means it qualifies another benefit for you that pays for a skilled nursing visit.
Yeah. So who needs to know this? the healthcare agent or the patient. Usually the patient is kind of, if you're in an acute care situation, you're not going to be on top of everything that's going on. So make sure that you have an advocate.
Mhm.
You need an advocate.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a basic, this is just unfortunate. It's hard to get this much information out to the general public, but if they could understand not just what insurance pays for, but when are you going to need it and why? What kind of scenarios warrant needing a skilled nursing stay? That could help them prepare as to, oh, I know if I'm going to go in for this for the hospital, I'm likely going to need a nursing visit, you know, a skilled nursing stay. And why would it be a week versus 3 weeks? There are parameters that it all depends on why you're in the hospital, whatever diagnosis they're treating.
Okay, let's say I was in the hospital for 4 days. I am now being released and to a skilled care facility. The skilled care facility is being paid by Medicare on my behalf. Does my regular doctor or the hospitalist now in charge is now overseeing my medical care?
I love your question, and I'm laughing because no, you actually never keep the same doctor until you get back home and have your original doctor. So well, this whole cycle of being in a hospital and moving to a skilled nursing setting, and then whatever happens there, whether you can go home or you go someplace else out, even after that, your primary care doctor is not going to have a clue that any of this is even happening unless you've informed the doctor, A, and B, he's going to go, oh, you're in the hospital. Oh, okay. Well, let me know when you're out, because he can't do anything for you until you're back home under his follow-up care.
Okay. So in the skilled care area, it's mostly rehabilitation.
Mostly, yes. And here's why. Typically, well, the longer you're in a hospital, you're in a bed, you're not moving. Even though they could get you up moving, they're kind of limited to how much movement they can give you. And depending on how sick you've been, you're very weak and they can't push you to get energy to move more. You're still healing from an illness or infection or an injury. You have limitations and you need more time. Now, I have had clients who had the option to go to skilled nursing because insurance was going to pay for it. But the quality of attention and service you get there is still not robust. It's good, but sometimes I've had clients say, I know my insurance will pay for that and I know I could go there, but I'd rather just get my rear end home and get services coming to me now there where I'm more comfortable, it's familiar, and I can run my show the way I want to run in my own home. Because as long as you're in a facility, hospital, or skilled nursing, you're under their rules. And there are limitations. Even if you're an eager beaver, you want to get moving, they don't have the availability to just give you free access to everything. You have to follow their rules, their regulations, and they are obviously, they have a lot of liability, so they don't want to put themselves at risk.
Yeah, and they're not all created equal.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, and coming out of the hospital, the discharge nurse is there to place you in skilled nursing facility that has the opening. And so
Right.
It's actually it's totally reversed today, where your skilled nursing facilities are absolutely packed.
Yeah.
And the hospital is pretty much empty because of the cost, and skilled nursing facilities are just, I mean, exploding.
Yeah.
And so they're overworked.
Yeah, I mean, I add another point here I think that is important to consider. The insurance is pressing those discharges out of the hospital because yes, it's expensive. But here's another reason though, why they're moving patients to the skilled nursing side instead of keeping them in the hospital, but they also don't want them going home too early, okay? So the skilled nursing recovery plan is important in the full continuum of recovery, because hospitals were finding, and insurance was having to pay for it, that people would go home too early, not follow through on their care plans, and bounce back within 30 days to the ER. So the whole idea is to reduce or prevent hospital readmissions and to still control cost of care. So getting them out of the hospital is important. Getting them to the nursing facility for rehab is important. Getting them home to a safer environment where they can stabilize there and not bounce back to the hospital is actually the big picture of things.
Okay, so Medicare, other than those individuals that have insurance, if you don't have insurance and you just have Medicare, Medicare pays for the full freight for the first 20 days.
Mhm.
And then after 20 days, it goes to 50% level. So what you find a lot of the times, at least I have, is that around the 17th, 18th day, all of a sudden I'm hearing from the skilled facility that your mother or father is really doing well and it's about time for them to go home. So this is again where an independent a nurse, a care manager such as Tara or someone else can come in and say, is she or he ready to go home? Are they getting the proper rehab? Because everybody, these are for-profit centers for most of all, and they're run as a business. And the medical care director, the doctor that's in charge of you, many times is also the owner of the care facility. So lots of money issues going around. And what you care about, or what your agent should care about, is the kind of rehab that you're getting.
Yeah.
Are you, you know,
that's what matters. And yeah, it is a business. I mean, businesses are allowed to run their business the way they want. The HMOs and Medi-Cal, when patients have a secondary insurance, okay, so you're going to have a primary insurance for an acute hospitalization, which is your Medicare benefit, but you're eventually you have a secondary insurance, and so it's either something you've paid for, like a Blue Cross Blue Shield, or it's could be an HMO like Humana, and they're going to start paying after the 100% Medicare coverage days end. And then if you don't even have a secondary like that, if you have a Medi-Cal, which is a California welfare insurance, that daily rate for the skilled facility to fill that bed goes way down. And a facility obviously wants to have as much reimbursement as possible. So they even get choosy, honestly. They will get choosy on who they really try to stay even after 100% Medicare is finished paying, and there's a share of Medicare, and then the secondary, if they don't have beds or your insurance isn't that much of a priority, they're going to try to influence the payer that stays in the bed and the lesser payer doesn't.
Exactly. Boy, you said it very nicely.
Hey, I have a question from a attendee. She said it doesn't say man or woman, but they recently fractured their hip and had surgery. They were in the hospital for 2 nights before they moved to skilled nursing, and he or she was completely incapacitated. Will this be covered by Medicare?
Will the sick stay be covered?
Yeah, it's usually it's under it depends on what kind of insurance that they have. If they just have Medicare, it may not, because you need to be in the hospital 3 days plus 1. So usually if they're been released after 2 days, I would say probably they were on some sort of HMO kind of a plan. But there's also, when you are discharged from a hospital, you're given a form, and on that form is an 800 number. And if you feel like you're being discharged too early, you can call that 800 number, and it's an independent organization that will review your situation, and if they feel like you're being discharged too early, they'll keep you in there another day. What I have found is that if you speak to the head nurse or to the hospitalist and say, hey, I don't think my patient is ready to go home, and these are the following reasons, and I really feel strongly, and if you don't keep them another day or two to see where they are, I will call the 800 number. And many a times they'll work with you and keep you an extra day or two in the hospital. But you can't do this over an iPad. You can't do it over a phone. You need to make sure that whoever is your healthcare agent is local and is willing to spend the time calmly speaking to the hospital staff. They're overworked, they're under pressure. Everything in the medical industry is totally changing. So, and what you care about is your mother or your father or your client. And I think if you have somebody as an advocate, I think everything is going to be okay. On nursing home is kind of an old term, Tara. What did you mean by nursing home here?
It is an old term. Another old term is convalescent center, convalescent home.
Yeah.
When I was really young, my parents would go give church services at the convalescent home nearby, and all myself and my siblings would toddle in, and we got patted on the head and pinched on our cheeks because we were so cute in the convalescent home. But what's changed from the old term is the new term is called nursing or rehab facilities. But that has changed because they've never in the past, like I'm talking 20 years or more, they weren't rehab focused. They were a long-term placement. That's where people went to go live the rest of their lives. Now those facilities are both. They are places where people will live and long-term live out their days in that facility environment. But there are also more acute still coming out of that acute hospital. They've recovered enough to stabilize, but they still have more IV therapy. They have maybe some wound care. Those things used to happen in the hospital setting, but now those happen at the skilled facility.
Yeah, because they're still skilled. They still need special skills in order to make the treatment. Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about custodial care. And why is custodial care so important?
Well, custodial care is when your acute issues have been managed. You've probably hit the highest rehab recovery status that you're going to have after your acute situation just
Trevor,
happened.
why don't you go ahead and go to the next slide? But let's talk about custodial care.
Well, custodial care is when you have come through the recovery process and whatever level you have plateaued at in your function of being able to dress, bathe, make your meals, take your medications, get to the restroom by yourself, do all those things safely. That's a custodial level. You don't need a skilled nurse. You don't need physical therapist. You don't need this high skill level of people. So now you're at a custodial level, but the question comes up, well, how much can you do for yourself if you're done recovering? Or maybe you do need a little more recovery. You need assistance. You just don't need it to be a nurse. Then you need a non-medical custodial level assistance.
Yeah, and it's all revolves around the activities of daily living. ADLs, for everybody uses the term ADLs, and they're used in the acute care setting, they're used in the skilled setting, they're used in the board and care setting, they're used in insurance. ADLs is something that you need to be aware of, and your agent for your healthcare needs to be aware of. We're going to get a little bit more into that in the next slide. But first of all, what is Medicare?
Medicare is a federally funded insurance that is designed to treat people who have worked in America and contributed to Social Security. And the federal Medicare benefit gets activated when you have an acute situation going on. That's all it's about. If you have an acute situation, let's say you had an injury, a fall, a fracture, a head injury, a trauma, obviously you have to get care right away, immediately as possible. So Medicare activates when you have something like that. And then they treat it, they get you stable, they get you out of the weeds and the woods of danger, hopefully. And then you go to another level of care.
Yeah, and Part A, it states right on the Medicare card whether or not you're eligible for that, and that's hospital, skilled nursing, hospice, some home health, and the lab test. Part B is the doctor services, the advanced healthcare planning, durable medical equipment. That's Part B.
And
so
it's all associated with that acute injury. So it's a connection to Part A and Part B connect to the acute injury that activated that benefit to begin with.
And Part C?
Part C is, those are like, those are plans that are coming up with where they kind of bundle services at a lower rate. And so that way, sometimes you actually can get more services through a Part C.
HMO is a Part C.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm trying to think of some of the HMOs that are here in Orange County.
Humana.
Aetna.
Yeah.
Kaiser.
All of these come under Part C.
And how you get that is each of us as an individual, you decide for yourself whether you want to maintain your own Part A and B Medicares, or you want to assign those Part A, Part B benefits to someone to manage all the services like a Kaiser. So they are a Medicare benefit, but it's Part C.
Yeah, and what the government does is pay per month. It's about $800 to $1,000. I can't remember exactly what the amount is, to that insurance company like Kaiser or Aetna to keep you healthy. And so the less medical cost they have to spend on you, the more money that they make. So it's you sometimes have to be a little bit of a squeaky wheel when you're in an HMO in order to get the services, because the system is set up a little bit different than you would imagine.
And if I can add to that, I think sometimes people don't realize it, but the HMO setup, so we're talking about Medicare Part C, which is where you as an individual have selected a Medicare entity to manage your health as an HMO, and you might get coverages like your medications don't cost as much, some extra services that Medicare Part A and B don't provide, but this Part C bundles some things in there that are health preventative, typically a lot of screenings and things. But you don't realize it, but when you actually either need a good doctor or actually you need a good quality place to go for immediate medical care, you're limited in choices because you have bought into this plan and you only go to the facilities that they have services contracted at. So example, those skilled nursing facilities, if you have an acute hospital stay, this is where I see families go, what? We didn't know that. You could show up in the hospital with an immediate, like a hip fracture, and you need to go to a rehab for a little bit of time. If you had a Part A benefit of your own, you could go to any place you wanted and they will take you because Medicare Part A gives really good reimbursement on a daily rate for a facility. If you're in an HMO, you're only going to get to go to the HMO that skilled facility that is contracted with the HMO, and the HMO has a lesser reimbursement daily rate in a Part C situation than if you had a Part A. So now your options are limited, and you may not like any of the facilities that they are contracted with, but that's where you got to go.
Yes, and every year you get to sign up to a different plan. So one of the major things that you need to look at, do not fall in love with your insurance company. They change every single year. They change what prices and what drugs they're going to pay for and how much. So all insurance agents in this area are paid exactly the same, and no matter what you order or purchase. So get together with an insurance agent and give them the drugs that you are presently taking so that they can pick out the most beneficial insurance company who will pay the most for your prescription drugs. Some drugs are $200, $300, $500 a month. So it could make a huge difference for out-of-pocket expenses. And, you know, you might not be surprised, but CVS is the most expensive pharmacy in the United States. And it's also one of the largest. So I find Costco to be excellent as far as low cost is concerned, but prescription drugs is a major expense. Let's go to the next slide. The local high cap on the Council on Aging is just an excellent resource. If you have a long-term care policy or you need to know anything about Medicare, they're local, they're run by volunteers, they operate on donations and insurance fines from the insurance industry. So they're completely neutral and objective. I found them to be very helpful.
If I can add to that, besides HICAP is just one of the services available at the Council on Aging office. It's an office. They have loads of resources, loads of services, and they're mostly geared for seniors. So Council on Aging is a website I highly recommend you go. And on that website, you will find electronically, it's called Answers Guide. The Answers Guide used to be a publication they would put out every year, and it's like a yellow pages. And so you can look at that online at that website, and it's got more content there to look at and consider too. It's very helpful. Very helpful.
Next slide, Trevor. Okay, long-term care. You know,
where do we begin?
Yeah, it's, you know, it's such a fear factor amongst us that we may need long-term care, but we don't really understand the definition of it. Yeah. And we had talked about custodial care and the ADLs, and talk a little bit about why is it so important to understand this?
This honestly is my hot button. When I learned, you know, when I worked as a respiratory therapist, I treated patients. I mean, I did a lot of CPR. I treated a lot of patients with some very serious pulmonary problems, and then they would go home or go somewhere else. I never knew where they went. You know, I just did patient care at the immediate level. It wasn't until I got into home care, which is a non-medical service provided at home, did I realize how much these ADLs play into the part of being able to operate on a daily basis. So if you have, let's say, anything that's going to impair your ability to take a bath, okay, well, you know, we don't really survive on bathing or not, but it's important. You need to be able to keep yourself clean. If you can't dress yourself, well, you're going to stay in clothing all day long because you can't get your arms over your head to put a shirt on, or you can't bend down and put socks on. It's something we don't think about because we do it every day if you have all your faculties and your function ability. So toileting is a very serious issue. You've got to be able to get on and out of the bathroom safely. And if you have bowel and bladder impairments of any kind, now you're going to have an issue being able to keep your body clean every day. So these are very important activities of daily living we all take for granted. But when you've been in the hospital, if you've either been affected by you can't walk or get up, you don't have balance to move, you don't have connection with your brain to function and do things safely, you really are at risk. You don't really have the ability to care for yourself. You need someone else to provide care to you.
Yeah. And if you have a long-term care policy, they'll actually bring an administrator or a nurse. Someone will actually come to your home, and they'll do a check mark as to what activities of daily living you cannot do, or do you have an inability to do. Now, if you are the person who is in long-term care and you're more than likely a male, then are you going to volunteer and say, gosh, Tara, I'm having trouble bathing, toileting, and I can't really dress myself in the morning. Do people just kind of volunteer all those things to you?
Well, there's two different scenarios. The one when you come out of an injury or illness, that's pretty clear. Everybody is following how much you can do for yourself. So there's no surprises on that. It is over time, though, if you haven't had a serious injury that landed you in the hospital where you had to go get medical attention, no. If you have, let's say you have osteoarthritis and you have a lot of pain in your joints and it really hurts to do certain things, you kind of just tend to stop doing things. Yeah. And then you go for a while without doing care for yourself. And then after a while, it's like, I don't want to admit I need help. And if you have a long-term care insurance policy that you can activate, then you do not mind saying I need help. But if you don't have a way to help yourself, and if your income or funds are limited to pay for help, you really don't. Most people go without the help for as long as possible. And unfortunately, quality of life goes down with that.
Yeah. And this is where the caregiving whole situation comes in as to long-term care. And caregiving costs are to help you bathe, to help you dress, to help you toilet. In other words, to help you live a high quality of life, to continue. So caregiving becomes really huge if you want to maintain a quality of life towards the end of your life. Yeah. This is usually insurance does not pay for caregiving cost, except unless you have a long-term care contract. And we're going to talk a little bit about that long-term care contract because they're far and few between today because of the expense. Now, usually what happens in a family who are a married couple is that the spouse takes care of the other spouse. And the statistic is that almost 40% of the time, the caregiving spouse dies before the spouse that they're caring for. Yeah. It is such a hard job, emotionally draining, physically difficult. Yeah. For a woman who's maybe 120 pounds, lifting somebody who's 180 in and out of bed, trying to help them toilet. It's just a very difficult situation. So
I can add to that, Pete.
Sure.
In addition to that, what we have found, and St. Jude Hospital has a really good program. It is the Caregiver Resource Center, and it's located by St. Jude Hospital in Fullerton. And they have a lot of statistics there about caregiving, and that's why they developed this resource center for caregivers, because the toll of caregivers is immense. And you're either trying to save money or you feel dutiful, like this is what my role is. I should do these things. I'm here to help. I'm with my partner and I'm going to do everything I can for them. And you really will, we tend to overextend ourselves as nurturing caregivers. And then what happens also, Pete, is that the caregiver ends up pushing off their own health care. They'll skip their annual screenings. They won't pay attention to their blood pressure being high. They're not eating as well as they used to. They're not being as active, healthy wise as they would, because all their free time is being given to someone else in greater need. So that's another reason why the caregiver longevity is not as long as the actual patient receiving the care.
Okay, just so you know, you got 30 minutes left. There's a question regarding the St. Jude Caregiver Resource Center. Is it open to anyone?
Yes, it's a service. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have the actual contact info, but we can get that.
Probably could Google it. Thank God for Google. Let's go to the next slide there, Trevor. Yeah, it's this is a point that you made earlier, Tara. Is that it's not just older adult; it's at any stage.
Yep.
You know, it's not an old age issue.
Right,
You know?
and that's the Life Care Association purpose. There are people there that specialize in children disabilities. There are adult disabilities, and then there's older adult disabilities. So it really is functioning as supporting the person who can't care for themselves anymore, and it doesn't matter how old they are.
Yeah. Let's go to the next slide. So the question becomes, how do you pay for long-term care? Most individuals self-insure.
Hey, before you get in there, why don't you talk about what it costs?
Sure. For long-term, paying for long-term care for a caregiver today, it can range anywhere from $22 to $35 per hour for basic long-term care needs. So on an annual basis, depending on how many hours per day or 24/7, it can run you anywhere between $100,000 to $130,000 a year. So it's not cheap. People always ask as to how long do you think I may need long-term care? The insurance industry basically says that if you're 85 years or older, you will probably, on average, it's 3 years or less. If you're 65, it's probably 3 months or less. So, you know, not all of us are going to need long-term care, but we all may need some assistance.
Right.
So we need to keep that in mind. Now, when we're paying for long-term care, because it's the activities of daily living, that what I find is that children sometimes don't understand that this cost needs to be paid. And usually one of your children is going to be your healthcare agent, your successor trustee. And when they see the amount of money that is leaving their inheritance, there might be a little bit of a conflict. So you may want to train whoever is going to be in that position that long-term care cost is going to be high and that you want to have that come out of your estate. So from a self-insure point of view, you want to make sure that you have, one, need to understand your net worth, need to understand your cash flow, because you want to keep money that is liquid. And it becomes very important. And your emotional and physical health is really important, because if you were like my parents, they did not want to spend $1 on caregiving. So and emotionally, they didn't want to accept it either. So self-insurance is there. Look at it. It's a two-dance process. Always look to self-insure first. Second is find out whether or not you can get insurance. But before you do that, most of us are going to die before we need the assistance. Okay, that's the good news. In fact, Tara,
What do you base that on? I don't think I've heard that. Most of us will die before what?
But most of us will die before we need long-term care assistance.
Oh, I'm assuming I will need it. I think I plan on living a long time.
In fact, you know, one of the things that we talked about a little bit before is what is a good death?
Oh, thanks for asking. You know, yeah, we're all going to die at one point. We don't know if it's early or late, but what we have seen, in my work in the industry, I have seen families not be prepared for their loved one's death. And we know we all die. And particularly if you have some chronic diseases that progress over time, you can anticipate something's going to become a terminal situation. And if you haven't had conversations earlier while things progress and they haven't turned into end stage, if you can have conversations about, hey, mom, you have this chronic condition, you know, we don't know when the last days will be or when we'll get there, but can we just talk about what are your ideas about how you would like those days to look for you? Particularly if you have been assigned as that caregiver helper to make those decisions, you need to know what your loved one's values are, what their wishes would be, what's important to them, because it gives you the advantage to operate under knowledge and information versus no knowledge and no information. That's a bad death. If you don't have knowledge, information about your loved one and their wishes for how they would prefer to die or not die, how they don't want to die, that you could do that too. It's going to help you push into those days when it gets very emotional, very intense, very sad, very scary. And you do not want to walk into those that scenario being blind, basically, or uninformed with decisions already made and known.
Yeah, the medical industry can keep you is all being paid on procedures. So let's go and do let's say a hip. You know, let's put a screw in the hip and you're going to be better. But it's not based on counseling. It's based on procedures. And so let's try this procedure. Let's try that procedure. You can literally go on and they can keep you alive for quite a while, just based on different kinds of procedures that they're going to be doing to you. What they don't talk about is the quality of life that may be impacted by that. Whether or not you have a procedure completed, according to the doctor, it might be a total success. But the quality of life of living with a severe stroke, not being able to ambulate, not being able to speak, might not be the quality of life that you were seeking at the end. So these kinds of things needed to be discussed.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a good example. I have personally practiced starting that conversation by, you don't just go direct, like, hey, what do you want to do when you die? You need to start with warm-up questions and periphery types of questions. And it's not a conversation that happens one time. It's built over time. And if the sooner you start gathering information, that's all you're doing is gathering information about what's important, what's valuable to your loved one. And you could use someone else's scenario to start the conversation. So for example, if something came up in the news, so-and-so just was announced, you know, some celebrity was just announced as having a new diagnosis and it's a cancer. And it opens a conversation about, wow, I wonder what that's going to be like. I wonder what kind of treatments they'll say they want, or maybe they don't want, or what are the side effects of the treatment they might have to live with cancer. It gives a dialogue that you can ask questions about for your own loved one based on someone else's scenario, and you can bounce things around that. And that's a good way to get going.
Yeah, and medical doctors are not very good about speaking about death. They have very few courses about death. It's not death sometimes means failure on their part.
That's right.
And so they're not really a good resource
No.
to talk about death. What I find is people who are stubborn, who are stay in control, are live the longest and the happiest, and that death doesn't come in as a slope. And what I mean by that is you get a little bit more sick, and then a little bit more sick, and then a little bit more sick, and then finally you die. A good death to me is when it's kind of like falling off a cliff. Most of us, by the way, will die in our sleep. But you don't hear that often, because what's the payoff if we think that you're going to die pleasantly, or that you won't suffer some sort of a pain? There's nothing to sell. So I wish you, me, Tara, and Trevor, all of us, a good death.
Yeah.
Die before we need, live with the children. My own family situation, I told my mom that she could come and live with me, and she said, I'd rather die. I said, really? So she lived with my oldest sister, and they put an extra room together, and she lived there until she died, and it worked out really well. So talk to your family.
Add to that, Pete, I think that's a really good suggestion. And then that is part of long-term care planning. We have some clients that don't have any children. They don't have an option to go live with somebody.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? But I'll tell you, as care managers, and we do talk about that, if we're early in the game with a couple or a client, they're really not needing care right now. But we do talk about who are the resources in your network for when you do need the help. What could that look like? Because moving an adult parent into the adult child's home is a great idea. It's not easy to do. It typically means there's a big adjustment in the household. Somebody's keeping a pair of eyes, supervising more than they would if the adult wasn't there.
It's huge. And if there's more than one child,
So
who's going to pay for things?
Into a child's home.
And it's an immense burden as well.
Right.
People have no idea as to the emotional and physical toll that it takes to care for someone else. You can transfer the cost to the insurance company. And that's where we talk about long-term care policies. But today, very few insurance companies will do long-term care. Genworth is probably the biggest and the largest, and probably the one we would recommend. Long-term care insurance policies are what's called indemnity policies, and by that it means is that it goes on a per day basis. So the premium that you pay for the insurance is determined by how much do you want the insurance company to pay per day on your behalf. So they can pay $50 a day, they can pay $100 a day, they can pay $500 a day. So that's one thing that you need to look at. Inflation protection. I would not get a policy today without inflation protection. It usually runs about 5%. Comprehensive policy, you really want that. You don't want just a residential care policy, because who knows, you may not want to be at home, and yet the policy or it's the other way around. You would have to go to a board and care in order for the policy to kick in. Right. So you want a comprehensive policy. If you do have a long-term care policy, take a look at it. Put it with your estate planning documents. A good agent for your long-term care policy will work with you under a variety of different scenarios. What is your net worth? What is your cash flow? Because Your cash flow will determine the premiums. And even though the long-term care policy may say we will not increase our premiums, they will go, let's say, to the California Commissioner on Insurance and say to the commissioner, hey, if we don't raise all of our premiums on our long-term care policy, we are going to go broke and we're going to leave. And so the insurance commissioner is going to say, yes, it's okay, raise your rates. So what happens is that close to over 50% of individuals who have long-term care policies stop carrying that policy after 6 or 7 years. So the other thing too about long-term care policies is that the individual doesn't let the healthcare agent know that there is a policy. So make sure you have your family members know about it. Long-term care, the avoid specific disease policies. Quack, quack. What does that remind you of? What insurance company? Avoid specific disease policies, okay? We're all going to die of something. That's what we need to cover. Not just cancer, not just Parkinson's, not just Alzheimer's. These are totally expensive. Determine the financial health of an insurance company. Very difficult to do, but you go to the rating agencies. So you want them to be in the top 2 categories of that rating agency as far as financial health is concerned. Who will file your claim? This is where your agent or your trustee, successor trustee, needs to know all about this. Age limit or pre-existing conditions. You normally can get a long-term care policy even if you have had a heart attack. What happens is if you need long-term care and you have another stroke or a heart attack, you will be excluded. But usually after 6 to 8 months, that pre-existing condition could go away. But you need to be in good health in order to get the policy. There are some policies out there that have no age limit. So not all policies are alike, and they're hard to get. Just like any insurance contract, you have 30 days to rescind. These contracts are written by attorneys, and they're very difficult to understand. What your agent needs to understand is what is the elimination period. Do we have the next slide, Trevor? Is it, let's see, can you, yes. We'll go back to the previous slide just a little bit. What is the elimination period? Is it that the shorter your elimination period is, the higher your premium cost. So you can have, in other words, you pay out of pocket for the first 90 days, your premium is going to be lower. There's some insurance company that allow you to pay your own long-term care costs for the first year, and then the insurance kicks in. So all the premiums are going to be all over the place based on your elimination period. Age, a big factor. So the daily reimbursement amount is going to be a factor, $50 to $500 per day. Length of coverage. Either their CalPERS used to do a lifetime benefit, no longer. CalPERS doesn't even offer long-term care policies any longer, and they have increased their fees almost triple on their lifetime coverage, and they allowed their members to do a 5-year length of coverage. So I would probably stick to probably 3 years is probably your best bet. Why don't we go back one slide, Trevor? California partnership policy. It used to be that there were insurance companies out there that partnered with California to create a policy because they didn't want members to have to spend down or Californians to spend their total estate in order to qualify for help from the government. And so, but could you turn up the slide where the partnership policies? Long-term care costs have risen so dramatically. All of the partners have that were partners with California are now no longer offering these policies. So if you have a California partnership policy, don't allow another long-term care agent to talk you out of it. In fact, if you don't understand the policy that you do have, call the Council on Aging, and they'll have volunteers there who will go through that policy and let you know what it is, because you need to understand the elimination period. You need to understand how many ADLs do you need to qualify for the long-term care coverage to begin. Let's go back to the slide. Medi-Cal, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there's only one or two facilities in Orange County that will not take Medi-Cal. Most will, and there's no such a thing as a Medi-Cal bed, but they much prefer private pay. So most of your facilities, Sunrise, gosh, there's about 5 or 6 national facilities that are kind of like glorified hotels, and they call them long-term care facilities. Do not pick out a facility based on just how it looks. I don't know about you, Tara, but if I check out a boarding care or a facility, one of the things I look at is who's the owner. I look at how long they've been in existence. How long have the employees been there? What kind of skill level do they have? Do they keep their patients at the facility active?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, and this is hard truth. I like to just be real with people. When you're on Medi-Cal, it is the lowest reimbursement for services that anybody providing a service is going to get reimbursed for. What that means then is when you do need long-term care and your main long-term care source for coverage and funding is Medi-Cal, which is the California State Welfare Program. It's a great program if that's the only thing you can do, but it is not full of options. It's full of lots of limitations, and it's just because it comes down to who has the ability to pay for a room in a nice place privately and pay that reimbursement rate, or there's obviously beds with Medicare reimbursement going on inside the facility also. The facility is able to provide higher quality of people, staff, services if their reimbursements on a daily rate are higher. So they're going to try to attract and keep those people, and they don't make good reimbursement on Medi-Cal. So it's not to say they don't accept Medi-Cal patients. It's just they would try to, like a ratio, talk about ratios. The facility has a Medicare ratio that they want to achieve on a daily basis. They have a private long-term care ratio that they want to try to keep at a occupancy. And then they have a Medi-Cal ratio that they have factored in they can have and still do the things they want to do the way they can do it financially. But if it gets upside down where there's not enough private pay and the majority are Medi-Cal paying, that facility is going to have a hard time meeting their expectations with the services they want to provide because the reimbursement is so much lower on a daily basis.
Yeah, and there's a lot of quote unquote workshops out there that quote will get you Medi-Cal qualified. Please stay away from those things. They're awful, and they sell you annuities and what they try to do is put all your monies into an irrevocable trust, and so that you quote unquote become impoverished. There's this 36-month look back for Medi-Cal, but the key is you need an advocate, and you need help in maneuvering through the medical system that we have today. So one of the most important things is that you have a good discussion with your healthcare agent. So make sure your healthcare agent is up to speed. That gives that person the legal authority to make decisions. Okay. What I find is that people spend about 10 minutes with their healthcare agent, and they tell them, oh, either do everything possible to keep me alive, or hey, pull the plug. And I, wish it was that easy, but it isn't. And so people need to have a way to begin that conversation. And I used to think it was the parents that didn't want the conversation. Now I totally flipped. I think the children don't want that conversation with the parent. So I recommend highly, go back to that Your Way slide.
Yeah.
This is the booklet that I use, and I think Trevor, you use as well, with potential. Yeah. It's just awesome. It takes about an hour to go through, but it just talks about how do you feel? It has no legal significance other than in communicating with the medical doctor or with the hospitalist that you have communicated with your principal about what they want. So Your Way is about your medical care. Recommend highly that you get a copy. It's free per person. Any additional one is $2.50. It's a not-for-profit. Pay $2.50. It's very worthwhile. How much time do we have left, Trevor?
We only got about a minute left, and okay. One of the attendees wanted me to share with you that I think she went and checked her to see if her hip surgery and her skilled nursing from that was going to be covered by Medicare, even though she only spent 2 days in the hospital. And she said it is going to be covered by Medicare.
Does she have an HMO or just have Medicare alone?
That information was not shared.
Okay. Okay. Just check it out. Okay. Go down to the slide. Pulse, we're not going to talk about, but if you want to, it's for the last year of life. If you think you're in the last year, it allows the medical doctor to make your decisions for you. Do you recommend any comments on that, Tara, from your point of view?
I do have a comment. I think what you just said is a little not completely accurate. The Pulse allows your doctor to do what you want, but you've decided what you want and what you don't want. That's what the doctor's going to do. Okay. So one of the things I have been watching on this document here in Orange County, There is a Pulsed Coalition who is doing a lot of education on this document and why they want people to know about it. They're not pushing that every single person have one. So the first thing is not everybody needs one. The only people that need one are those who are frail and vulnerable already, either due to age or due to disease processes. And when and if, not when, but if let's say you're at home, you're not in a hospital environment, you're outside of a hospital environment, you're at the office, you're at home, you're at the store, and you have a cardiac arrest. They're going to call 911 because that's what people do. We want to save lives. They call 911, the paramedics come, let's say you're at your house, and they will begin CPR immediately on your body to get your heart pumping again. But that's a great thing. We like that idea. But here's the thing, the chances of surviving CPR are 10%. That's the reality.
It's an amazing statistic.
It's a reality. It's a real story. CPR can save lives, but it's not a guarantee it's going to save lives. But on top of that, there are complications to the body that's older. Bones are brittle and things happen during CPR. So this is the part where people don't typically talk about it. I've seen it. I've given CPR a lot. There's a potential risk of aspiration because you're giving mouth to mouth and you're pushing on the chest at the same time. You could develop aspiration pneumonia. You could develop, most likely, fractured ribs. When you fracture ribs during CPR, which is most likely going to happen, you're trying to save a heart to get it pumping again. You've got to put a lot of pressure on the ribs, on the sternum, and the ribs will then puncture your lungs. So now you have a lung puncture. So you're going to survive, possibly 10%, you might survive, but when you survive, you're going to have other complications to heal from. And then of course they're going to treat you. Why did you have a heart attack? So
on that happy note, Tara.
Real quick, before we go, thank you, Tara, that was lovely. We have your information on there. Also, Pete, there's been a couple questions real quick. Where can we get the Your Way booklet?
It's right on the outline.
There's a slide number slide number 21.
There's the website they can go to. And look, we could discuss this for 3 hours easily. So what we're going to try to do is sometime between now and the fall workshop, we're going to try to do a 3-hour session on this entire area of the right to die and hospice care versus palliative care. There's lots of good information on the materials page. We just begin the discussion in this area. So end of life deserves a lot longer, but we are limited by an hour and a half. Tara, thank you so much. You did a good, absolutely fantastic job in communicating the end of life story. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity. It's true, there's so much more to be talked about, and it's a lot to absorb at one time. But we do know the older we are and the sicker we are, it's inevitable. So, but I just want to highlight, this is why it's so important to take care of ourselves as long as possible, so we don't need hospitalization, so that we don't need caregiving and extra support services. Just do the things that you know you can do. Exercise, eat well, be active, be around social people, be happy, be alive, and you will not need as much as some other people do.
Okay.
Thank you. On that note.
So Pete, next week we are pivoting back to equity investing. Sounds exciting. Tell us a little bit about what to expect.
We're going to talk about equity investing, the stock market investing, how to do it, what the terminology is going to be, and why should we be investing in equities as well.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We may see many of you tomorrow for the It's Your Estate series. Thank you all for joining, and thank you again, Tara. That was excellent.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.